Well, hello, everyone out there in podcast land. Thank you so much for joining me for another episode of the Get Happy podcast with moi, your host, Rudrani Davy. And the crowd goes wild now and in the future. I can hear it. So today I have a very special guest. I've known this lady for quite a while. I'm a fan of her book. The only thing missing in this book is her picture. I don't know why she's not in here. We may have to do a reprint. She is the author of Right Recovery for You. She is a certified facilitator of Access Consciousness. She's been involved with this Access movement for many years. And without further ado, Marilyn, thank you so much, Marilyn Bradford, for joining us for this conversation.
Thank you for having me. I'm delighted to be here.
We're so delighted to have you. And we very rarely do this in other languages. So I'm delighted that we are also having this translated into Portuguese and German and in French. So yes. Without further ado, I do have a very specific question about this book. I love this book. I'm also a relationship counselor and a holistic therapist. And so I have brought this little book up to a lot of my clients, and it's been very helpful. And oddly enough, a lot of them end up seeking more with Access because of it. So thank you for being an introduction to those who are seeking, which I know you've been a seeker for many years, and I want to hear that story. But I do want to read just this little piece on the back, because I love this. And for anyone who has an issue with addiction, I'm a perfectionist. I know what all that's about, and that's okay. That's my superpower. We've been told certain things about it as a wrongness. And so I love what you say here. As long as you're operating out of what you've been told addiction is, and all the myths and all the lies that go along with that, you will never be able to choose beyond it. If you are willing to consider a radically different approach to addiction, this is the book for you. So, can you tell us a little bit about your story on how you got to write this book and what you mean by this statement, all the myths and lies, and going beyond that?
Yeah, a big question, but I'm happy to respond.
I know it was a lot.
Hours. So actually in 1988, I was diagnosed as an alcoholic and depressive and all of that, and went into therapy and traditional treatment. I was in 12-step for, I don't know, 15, 16. My sense of timing is not great, because there was a period in there where I wasn't really attending meetings much. I wasn't drinking. I just started Access a couple years before. And backing up a little bit, in 1980, 88, 89, anyway, I went back to graduate school to get a master's degree in clinical social work with a specialty in addiction. And then I worked at a private psych hospital for 3 years, then worked for a psychiatrist, and then did my own private practice. So I've been a therapist for over 30 years, basically.
Wow.
So that is what started this whole journey. And in the meantime, I understood that pretty much the only thing available was 12-step. There were a few other things: women for sobriety, rational emotive therapy for addiction. None of them, I mean, I got it. I got that it was really good for people to have a place to go and be sober. I was not wild about the fact that it makes everybody wrong. I mean, someone once said, "What's it like to be in AA?" I said, well, for 2 weeks, every morning and every night, make a list of where you're selfish, self-seeking, dishonest, and afraid, and see how you are afterwards.
Oh my goddess, are you kidding? So they basically want you to make a list every day to reaffirm the wrongness of you.
Exactly.
Wow.
And I get that there are people who, and also it's an answer.
Sure.
You are powerless. You can't do it. You have to have a sponsor. You need to do this, 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 and this. I'm a humanoid. It's like telling me what to, and I did it. I did the program. I really did. I sponsored people, blah, 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 blah. But all the while going, I think there's something better. Right. So I got into Access without having any thought about it for addiction or therapy or anything, just because it seemed cool. Someone had lent me recordings, which at that time were cassette tapes.
I was there at that time.
I was listening on my walks. But anyway, I was so struck with it. I went to my first access class in 2006, and then I just couldn't stop. I'm like, oh my gosh. So at some point after, I don't remember, maybe a year, at that point I was doing private practice, I approached Gary Douglas, the founder of Access, and I said, hey, can we do something with access and addiction? And he's like, yeah. And at that point, there was Right Body for You. It was the only right class. I said, what if we call it Right Recovery for You? He's like, oh, I like that. And maybe I'll do some more right classes, which is sort of how the right classes all got born.
It's your fault.
It's my fault for suggesting it. But anyway, so I started, continuously saying, well, what would access be with this? What tool could I use? And I realized that, access is empowering you to know that you know, and traditional addiction treatment is disempowering you to make sure that you don't know anything and we have the right answer. So that's one of the biggest things about it.
I love how light we can make this conversation.
I know it. And that's the thing, when you get happy. I mean, every time I do classes, we laugh most of the time because, and we're just going, oh my gosh, I just had this awareness. So that's one of the main things. Other things are, I always tell people, never identify with an addiction. Never say, hi, I'm Marilyn, I'm an overeater, I'm an alcoholic, because what you identify with, you have to act out. So I tell people things like, hi, my name is Marilyn. Currently, I'm smoking more than I'd like to, but I'm beginning to make different changes. And once I walked into a meeting, this was probably the last meeting I went to, and I said, hi, my name is Marilyn. I used to be addicted to unconsciousness and anti-consciousness, but I'm making different changes now.
Oh my God, can I just say how much I love what you just said? Because isn't that the truth with anything we do that's addictive? We get into this knee-jerk thing where we don't even ask if it's true for us.
Exactly. Or if it belongs to us or anything like that. We don't question. And that's the other thing, not the other thing, but another incredibly helpful thing. Something I always work with my clients on is to question. And in traditional mental health treatment, addiction treatment, there is no question. We will tell you the answer. We are the experts. This is what's wrong with you. And
we have the steps you can follow.
And this is what you need to fix. So that's a large part of that's my story in a very small nutshell.
No, I love it. I love it. So then this book came about.
Yes, Gary said, you have to write the book. I'm like, okay. So I wrote the book.
And you'd never written a book before?
No.
It's kind of how it happened for me. I loved writing, and I have a double minor and a major, but one of my minors is I minored in English. So I loved writing compositions, and I wrote articles and all of this. And then when I got hurt in India in 2008, everyone kept saying, you need to write a book about it. People need to know your story, and because you're so positive, and what got you through it. And it was really the tools of access. So I'd been introduced in 2003, and I got shot in 2008. For those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, I assume you've been following my podcast, but if not, just Google my name and you'll have the rest of the story. But the thing that I attribute to being able to get through it was having these miraculous tools. Yes. I didn't have to identify with being the victim of circumstances.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so then
actually both the identifying, being the victim of certain circumstances, and I want to just take a minute to talk about what I've become aware of that addiction really is and what it isn't. Because people tend to focus on alcohol and drugs. They focus on the target. Addiction is actually just an energy looking for a target. So the target.
Please say that again. Please just say it again. I want you guys to really lean into what Marilyn just said.
Addiction is an energy looking for a target.
Okay. So please extrapolate and let us know more about that.
And it's an energy many of us learned from this reality or from our families. There's this idea that, well, if your father was an alcoholic, you'll be an alcoholic. From my perspective, it doesn't work like that. if your family had the energy of addiction, which mine did, although there was no hint of an alcoholic or drug addict anywhere in the line. And I tell this little brief story. My mother was one of two daughters, no sons in this family line. My mother was one of two daughters. They each had two daughters. Of the four of us, three of us became alcoholic, and one was a raging codependent, which to me, that's how we chose to act out the energy of addiction, because both of the families were fairly screwed up.
That is so light. That's so light
Yeah.
in my world. And I've never even heard of this analogy before. Was it something you came up with, or?
Yes, basically.
Wow, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And so addiction can show up as addiction to disorganization, addiction to trauma, drama, addiction to perfectionism, addiction to being right. You know, it can have any target. Some of them are very considered very good. Addiction to making lots of money, addiction to working hard, addiction. I just did a 3-part teleseries that was really fun called Ending the Addiction, or Recovering from the Addiction of Poverty to Create the Greatness of You.
Oh, wow. Why wasn't I on that call?
Well, yeah, and it was just looking at the belief systems people have, because the church and the nobility of poverty and all of that. So anyway, I just really wanted to let people know that one of the big differences here is that it's about where people have a sense, because of a sense of wrongness or never having been schooled in what being present is even like, they have to find some way to completely leave themselves and leave their body. It can be a substance, it can be a behavior, but it's like a default space that people go to. And when, you know, in the book, I talk about you are the antidote to addiction. And that's really true, because the more, my whole programs are about empowering people to be them, to know that they know, to come into all of those parts and pieces that they had to cut off and hide. They're never gone. They're just hidden. In order to try to fit into this reality, to be normal, all of those kinds of things.
That's amazing, because this is the first time I've ever heard it put quite that way. And I've read this book.
I have made a few changes in Discovery since I wrote the book, as one does in Access.
Right. That's true. That is true. I have second edition on Choosing Happiness, actually, because I ended up adding a lot of bits that I thought were nuggets of Gary Douglas. And it's his fault we're even having this conversation.
Absolutely.
And to be able to look at things in a completely different way. And I love that you facilitate all these classes. And I know you've got several coming up.
Yes.
You have a, well, here, I'm going to put my big girl glasses on for those of you watching on YouTube now and in the future. For those of you listening, pregnant pause. So Right Recovery for You Certified Facilitator Training, from which I understand you have to be a certified access consciousness facilitator, and you had to have read the book.
Yes.
That's coming up, well, the end of February 25th through March the 1st.
Yes.
And it's a telecall only. It's over Zoom or?
Well, it's not it's online.
Online.
5 days. I think it's 3 hours a day. I have to look.
And then I love this one, Recovery of You with Ease, which if you're not a certified facilitator, in fact, you don't even have to be involved in Access. This one has no prerequisites.
This one has no prerequisites. And we do a lot of fun exercises so that we have people from having not done Access or maybe just had their bars run to people who've been CFs for a long time. So it's all geared to it be inclusive. That's the thing.
I love it. And you guys, so put this down on your calendars, okay? And it's the year 2022, by the way. April 6th, I just want to be clear.
Yeah.
April 6th through 10th, again, it's online. And I think this one's also 3 hours per day. And
it's
then
2 hours here.
Oh, 2 hours.
I want to let people know, particularly people who are newer to this, is that the 6th is 2 hours and it's an intro. So that you can just do that to see whether or not it's a good fit, or if you have a question, or you can do the whole 5 days, which includes the intro.
That's very smart. Because I know when I first dipped my toe into Access, I was like, oh my God, what is this? I have to have more. You know, I leaped in. I read every book they had available at the time, which I think was maybe 8 books. Now we have so many books. And so many prereqs for becoming a CF. Things have really changed, but it's been amazing. So where do you see the future of right recovery? Because it's funny, I've known about it for a long time, but it seems now that it's really catching fire.
I believe that. Last year in January was the first time in 12 years we'd had a facilitator class, because it just went through some different things. But the great thing about it was now the facilitators of Right Recovery for You in all different countries, and they do tasters. We have 7 tasters, I believe. Things like making yourself a priority, screen got you hooked, making peace with your body, having all of you in relationship. And the reason I did it that way was that I realized when I did the first facilitators training, everybody was trying to do alcohol and drugs, but almost worldwide, you can't do that if you don't have a license. So people were just coming up against brick walls and feeling frustrated. I wanted to give the facilitators topics that could appeal to a wide variety of people, kind of covert access, introduction to access. And then when they've done this for a while, they can do a one-day class. And then there are a few people who've had a lot of experience with alcohol and drugs. Maybe they were also in 12-step, that you can get special certification to do those classes. I wanted to make it so that, that people could have real success with their businesses and that we could draw in a lot of different people.
I love that you put it that way. It's funny how rules and regulations of this reality can keep us from actually healing ourselves and others. So I just want to thank you for having that awareness, being able to step into, okay, what else is possible here?
Yes.
How can we create and generate this so that it can get to the people that are actually seeking it?
Yeah. How can we do this different? What else is possible? Exactly.
Wow. I love it. And I'm looking forward to dipping my toe into some of these classes.
They're fun. I did one a few months ago called Addiction to Image, and that one they all rocked, but that one was really taking people to spaces they didn't know they could go to.
That's fantastic. Yeah, I recently took, and I don't remember the title because it was really long, of Brendan Watt, and then you kind of co-facilitated along with him. But it was about addiction as well, because he's just recently decided that he wants more of himself and wants to be more conscious. That he'd had enough of all of that. And just so you guys know, Brendan Watt is another certified facilitator of access consciousness, brilliant being. And he did 3 calls. And it was funny because, I went to that space of, well, I guess you have to be an alcoholic or a drug addict to take this class, but it pinged me. And I've learned that when something is pulling at you, you got to pay attention. So it was one of those things where I asked that question. You guys have heard me say this many times. If I choose this, what will my life be like in 5 years? To get out of my head. And I was like, I want to go to that. So I even had family here and I rearranged my schedule. And it was so enlightening, these 3 calls. And, it's like now it's pinging me that I have I'm one of 6 children, Italian. And I was raised in a very Italian household. You wouldn't know it by my house, but if you go to any of my siblings' house, they all have the Italian flag, a picture of the Pope, all the things, right? But what I realized is my family, they had this mentality of poverty, and they were very righteous about it. And it's very interesting. And they held on to everything. So,
Hoarding.
Hoarders.
Yes.
So now I'm this kind of minimalist, the things that I have the most in are actually my office, but you go to the rest of the house and there's not a lot of stuff. But when my mom moved in, I had to learn to not freak out because she came with a lot of stuff, material stuff. And so now I realize, I think part of my addiction to being orderly is because I didn't have that as a child. So I went completely the other way. Does that make sense?
Yes, because it's a way of controlling. And that's probably or could be. You might ask a question, is there controlling underneath that?
Oh, yeah.
I think I told you. A lot of OCD comes from, is this, because we strip away so much to try to fit in that we don't have access to our capacities, our brilliance, our gift. So we resort to addictions to controlling our environment, which never work out that well. That's why we have to keep repeating them, counting and washing our hands and making everything tidy and neat or whatever it is. And being tidy is nice. Clean and tidy is good, but obsessively.
That's a good addiction, right?
That's a good
I'm a
addiction.
good humanoid.
Exactly.
That is so interesting. I used to count my steps as a child. They had to be even. I never stepped on cracks, I've never taken medication for OCD or ADHD. I was later in life, especially when I found access, I decided that was my superpower. And my reasons and justifications for it were, hey, if I know where everything is, that if I have to go at a moment, then I can find what I need with ease,
Right.
But I get it now. And I'm not going to make it a wrongness anymore.
No, it's not a wrongness. It's addiction is a coping skill because we're not given the skills that were required. Another story that I tell sometimes in my classes is a woman who came in and she said, I'm an alcoholic, I need help. I said, well, I always ask questions like, how do you know? Someone comes in and says, I'm depressed. I'm like, how do you know?
I love that.
So she says, well, I'm drinking 2 bottles of wine a day. I'm like, well, that's a fair amount, but tell me about your life. What happens? She says, well, because I always also ask, what's right about your drinking you're not getting? What's right about your OCD you're not getting? What's right about your smoking you're not getting? So she's like, what do you mean I'm drinking 2 bottles? I'm like, what's right about it? What does it do for you? And she said, well, when I get back from work, I go out on the terrace. It's the only time my husband and my kids, who are foster kids who are causing a lot of disruptions, don't interrupt me. They know that's my time. So it turned out foster kids were acting out. Her marriage was falling apart. Her job was iffy. I said, look, you don't have any other coping skills to deal with these things.
Right.
I said, let's work on that. It would be good if you could minimize a little bit, but don't worry so much about the drinking. Just don't drive, don't do anything, be aware. But let's look at some other ways we can deal with these things. And that's what I find over and over and over again. Children aren't giving good coping skills or good ways to handle things.
Sure.
So there's this huge deficit. And what do? I have no idea. I'm anxious. I feel wrong. I don't know how to manage this relationship. I keep losing money. Oh, I think I'll go do whatever, run for 8 miles.
Oh no. I'm a marathon runner. I've run over 200 half marathons. It's so funny you're saying it and my body's lighting up as you're talking, and now I see how I was coping. My parents fought. So I don't ever remember them not fighting.
Yeah.
And then I created the same thing in my very brief marriage.
Yeah.
And it's just interesting, we're taught
yes,
these behaviors, and
absolutely.
If you don't know anything else, that's what
normal.
You're going to choose. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. We're going to have you back on the Get Happy podcast because I want to know more. And I'm definitely going to be snooping into your classes. So I'm very happy about that. Now, this is the Get Happy podcast. Oh, you know what? I have to ask you one other question. I'm sorry, my brain. Sorry, you people out there. Yes, this is how ADD works in real time. When did you realize that you were using coping mechanisms with your drinking? Was there was it access that, was it something that was said in access? Or?
It was actually the last time I drank a lot, and now I do have alcohol sometimes, but I don't have the allergy. There are people who really should not drink, but right. If someone has an allergy to peanuts, we don't call them a peanutaholic.
Right.
Don't eat anything with peanuts. But the last time I drank, I lived in Austin. We'd gone down to San Antonio, which is about an hour and a half away, to have a brunch. It was a Sunday and go to museums. Well, we drank so much at the brunch that we couldn't go to museums. So my then husband drove us back. And then I ended up going to a grocery store, and you could buy wine on Sundays, I think, but nothing stronger. So I got a bottle of sherry and took the not on Sunday label off and drank the whole thing. And then I realized this is not good. I'd like to do something different.
Wow.
So I just had an awareness about it.
That's interesting because you were doing something to take you out of your awareness, and that's when you got the awareness.
That's when I
find that brilliant.
Yeah, that's when I got the awareness. I was going back for it. The bottle was about 3/4 down, and I was going back for more, and I'm like, something's off here.
This is not normal behavior.
This is not
Maybe it
normal.
is.
This is not behavior that's good for me.
Right. And that's the piece I want you guys to get. It's not
Yeah.
about making yourself wrong for it. Does it work for you? Hey, if drinking, 2 bottles of wine and 3/4 of a bottle of sherry is working for you, we're not saying that there's a wrongness to it.
No, it's just asking that question. What is this creating in my life? What
Right.
direction would I like my life to go in? And is this contributing to that direction?
Yeah, I love it. I love it. I love it. Okay, so I have to ask you this question, Marilyn, because this is the Get Happy podcast. What do you do to get your happy on?
I just be. I choose it. I was one of the few people who took the Happiness is Just a Choice class. I think there were 30 of us, including, or 20 even online. And I really got it then. Happiness is a choice, no matter what's going on in your life. This reality says you get happy because of things. There you go. Yeah. But for me, I really managed to get it. And when I'm doing grumpy, I'm like, you could choose happiness, Marilyn.
Yeah.
What's going on?
It's like a flip of a switch. And I know you
It
guys
is
were
that, a
saying,
flip of the switch.
how can you do it? Da, da, da. It is just a choice. But if you need to really indulge in being cranky pants, then indulge to the point where you're laughing at yourself. That's what I do.
I like it.
It's like, oh my God, I wish blah, 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 blah. I can't believe it's like when our president of the United States hijacks the TV right in the middle of a show that I want to watch. And I'm like,
Right.
and I'm storming around, and then it comes back on like 2 minutes before the show's over. I'm like, what's right about this? I'm not getting and then it's like, oh, it'll rerun, or I can find it on YouTube later, or even if I can't, I'm really going to make it about that.
Yeah.
There's
And
a lot
I
worse
can
things.
exaggerate it. That's another thing I do. I'm feeling kind of, oh my gosh, I'm this terrible thing. My friend moved away, and I don't know if I can cope. And, I just exaggerate it. And then it becomes so stupid, I can't do anything else.
You get an Academy Award for that one. Marilyn, thank you so much for being my guest today. This has been
Thank
so
you for having
delightful.
me. This has really been fun.
It really has. And I've really enjoyed getting to know you better. I've seen you in classes for years, but maybe next time I see you in a class in the future, we can go have a cocktail. I'm just messing with you.
That's fine.
Go have lunch or something. I would
Go have
really
lunch.
love to get to know you better. I really would.
That would be fun.
That would
Thank
be
you
great.
so much, Johnny. I really appreciate it.
You're so welcome. And you guys, I'm going to make sure you have all the links so that you can find Marilyn. I know, not to make it significant, I just want to say this is a big topic.
Yes.
And if this speaks to you, or it speaks to someone, perhaps you can share this podcast episode with them. If you like this podcast, you could subscribe. We're on all the usual places, Apple and Spotify, and of course, YouTube. And I appreciate you listening. And if you have any questions, I read all the questions in the comments. So,
and also people can, if my website is marilynbradford.com, MarilynBradford.com. So there's lots of free stuff on there, previous
I love it.
calls, all kinds of things you can download. So that can give you a better sense of right recovery for you and what we do.
thank you so much for offering that to everyone. I'll make sure that link is available as well.
Thank
And
you.
it'll be available in Portuguese and French and German.
Wonderful. That's absolutely wonderful.
So thank you, you guys. Thank you again, Marilyn.
Thank you.
And until
All the
next
best.
time, until next time, you guys, ciao, ciao for now.
Mwah.
Word from our sponsor.
Feeling a little funky? Devi Essentials Pure Oil Blends can maximize your inner balance. These 100% pure oil blends are designed to vibrationally open up the channels within the physical and multi-dimensional bodies. Your body. So if you're trying to find your groove, let these pure essential oil blends work for you. For more information, go to rudranidevy.com. That's RUDRANIDEVI.com.